too big, it'll shut down your computer.
Yeah. So I am excited to have you. And normally I like to kind of do introductions, but I think I don't think I could do a job that is worthy of you. I think you've got to I'm sorry, you've got to do your own introduction. We don't have the budget for anything more. So how would you, I mean, you're a human being of many talents and attributes. How would you or how do you describe yourself to people?
I describe myself as an executive coach, and I landed on it because there is an executive function in every human being's brain.
Mm,
And so I consider myself someone who helps people use the executive function of their brain more effectively and authentically. And part of that is because I bring this intersectionality to the world. So exactly what you said, Dawid, which is there's so many parts of me that I've learned to integrate into one whole person. And because I've done that kind of work for myself, I feel particularly successful at helping other people do that as well, as a Sherpa, as the guide
mm,
on the side, as they are the sage on the stage of the sessions towards the vision of themselves that they want to be. I loved when a CEO told me once, "You make me a better version of myself." And I
mm.
thought, squad goals, that's the
Yes.
thing. That's the
Yes.
thing that I'm aiming for, is for someone to run alongside with me and become their best self. So that's what I do.
I love it.
With a
I love it.
particular focus on Afro-Latinas in senior leadership, in media design, technology, and education.
And when did you sort of refine that focus? Has it always been your focus, the latter portion, focusing on Afro-Latinas?
Well, I thought of intersectional, and it's just so broad
Mm, mm,
that I thought of the people who I vision probably think little about this type of stuff and probably could use it. So that ended up informing how I thought about it. I thought they could probably use more oomph and
mm.
they probably don't think about it. So I wanted to signal you too deserve unconditional love and support.
I love that. And you know, I I bring up topics of love and fear and fun and joy and play and science and art and all of it in my coaching sessions, not because I think it's the right thing to do, but because I can't help myself.
Right.
And I also do happen to be biased and think it's the right thing to do because it helps people access or tap into those parts of themselves that have been buried under layers of rust or dust. Just was talking to a client earlier today, and she shared with me that she feels like the corporate life has sapped or sucked her soul. I think she used not even sapped, but like sucked her soul dry. And she no longer not identifies. She no longer recognizes herself in herself, and that was like jaw dropping moment, for like a 9 in the morning conversation.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I met her. Within 90 seconds, we're having that depth of
She was
conversation.
sharing it right away.
Hmm.
I'm gonna plug in my computer. Let's pause 1 second.
You got it. You got it.
Yeah, I'm always amazed at how vulnerable folks can be in that first session, to your point, within 90 seconds to open up about the core issue.
Yeah.
And it's as if they have been moving through their lives without oxygen.
Wow. Wow.
That there's so, when they speak of the soul, it's such a vital part of your being. And for them to show up in a session and say, my soul needs its
Mm.
core nutrition has
Yeah.
been depleted and they're running on empty. They're running on fumes
Mm. Or junk food, right? Or they're
or
running on
junk
junk food.
food or TikTok.
Yes. Oh yeah.
You know,
So, mm,
news, it's all really sort of depleting. And for somebody to come and show up with a self awareness and be ready to do the work, it's a real vulnerable spot.
and it's a safe spot. The psychologically safe, the psychological safety part is a non-negotiable for me. Like, I mean, but because I create that or I crave it, I demand it, I co-create it. It's I think it's refreshing for some people because they're not used to it. And I forget that because I'm a coach and I have my life, my former life as a recovering HR guy, right? I tended to go for or gravitate towards spaces where psychological safety was a given essentially, and I have to be reminded, and I am reminded almost daily of how important, how rare it is, how refreshing it is to have it in the confines of a of a in person or even a Zoom rectangle session. So it's just a nice reminder that a lot of people don't have that psychological safety in their work. I mean, talk about personal lives, but I'm talking they don't have it in their 9 to 5, 9 to 7, in the majority of their waking hours. They don't have it.
Yeah, somebody just posted that the most impactful person in somebody's life after their therapist and their doctor is their supervisor.
Mm,
And we know the data around people join companies for the mission, vision, values that are written on the website, and then they leave companies because of their manager. And I think you're right. It's that creation of psychological safety that creates the space for people to A, do their best work, but also B, just be the best versions of themselves. And to have that space in a coaching session at least gives them a doorway to start incorporating that experience into the rest of their lives, especially at work, which to your point is where we spend the majority of our time for most of us
yeah.
on the planet.
When did you realize that you were good at this?
When I was 3 or 4, honestly, and I think so many, especially gay men, have this experience where they were their mom's best friend.
Mm,
And I think the other reason why the Afro-Latina thing came up is the really powerful, badass women
mm,
who, in many ways, wear the pants. They have the cojones in La Familia. They really wear the pants at home. And then they have to show up at work and manage teams. And they're being asked to be the mothers
mm,
on the team. They're throwing the parties. It's a societal pressure
yeah.
to be, mama in the office. And they really cook really good food too, anyway. But
No, not anyway. That is the good love language, right? And for many communities, it certainly is for me, and it's a way to
yeah,
access, and create that psychological safety. Because if somebody's,
create
you know,
comunidad. They create the sense of
yeah,
we're in this together. They're almost the default in organizations for this sense of family that some people just really crave. A lot of people go into
mhm,
offices and look for mommy and daddy. And
yeah,
there is something really powerful about it. My mother was always that kind of person in the world, and I was always her confidant and the person who she turned to help run the home. And so by the time I got into college, I remember my roommate left Creative Arts House, where we had created a community of artists, dancers, actors, blah, blah, blah. And he turned to me at one point, he says, I'm leaving next year. And I said, why? Why would you leave? And he said, Karl, you have turned into the Creative Arts House ruler. He used a darker word.
oh, oh, okay,
And I realized I was so passionate about creating community and creating a safe space for people who were not revered in the community, that I was doing it in a very controlling way. And so I've refined that over time because I just didn't want to scare away the people that I really deeply loved. So I've been refining my technique since
Wow.
18 or 19 around how do you create space for people who might be vulnerable or neglected or don't feel as that they have as much agency in their lives. So I've been doing it for a while. And then I ended up in HR, and then I ended up running HR for small organizations, which were 20 to 30 people. And again, I think part of me just really wanted to have full control.
Mm-hmm.
But refining it to the place where somebody could say, you actually are helping us be the best versions of ourselves and not the version that I want them to be, even though in general, I think I have good intentions.
Yeah.
It never is what I want. It really is what the other person deeply desires for themselves. And I think the big aha for me, especially last year, was every human being on this planet, and barring mental illness, which is a whole different conversation, every human being on this planet actually has this deep, immutable wisdom inside themselves about who they are meant to be on this planet, this tiny blue globe. They're imprinted with a design. And if you think about all the human beings that went into making any of us that exist right now,
Yeah.
the number of genealogy pieces and DNA pieces that go all the way back to create the person that's standing in front of you today.
Yeah.
That's just
Fascinating.
incredible wisdom and DNA.
It's fascinating, right? And all of the insane numbers of permutations and things that had to have happened between the molecules and between the organisms. It's beyond me.
Each person
So
has infinite wisdom in their body, in their cells, through
yeah.
their DNA, as you're talking about, and then also in their minds. And they're nothing but synapses, like bouncing
Yeah.
stuff back and forth. And so to evoke that from somebody, especially when they answer the question with, I don't know. And you just like glow as a coach when somebody says that, because you're like, let's go deeper.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm of the mindset that and I've heard this quote, and I don't know if it was misattributed to Albert Einstein or so. I'll just go ahead and say essentially we're all born, we're all born geniuses, and then like society knocks it out of us, for some of us anyway, more than others. And that's a shame. So part of my agenda, right? I'm not supposed to have an agenda. Well, part of my agenda, other than having people become the better version or the best version of themselves, is tapping into that childlike sense of joy and adventure and wonder and play, because I've seen that completely positively impact the way they communicate, the way they collaborate, the way they perform, in a very sort of quantitative business sense. But I'm not really interested in the output. I'm interested in them just tapping into that wisdom, as you called it, or tapping into that
A
primordial
well of
awesomeness.
reserve that they've not tapped into.
That's it.
It's
That's
like
it.
a battery and a resource that's
Mm.
untouched.
Yep.
And what will happen for me, it's this childlike wonder at what's gonna happen
Yep.
when they find it, because they're gonna
Mm-hmm.
be more powered internally. Their teams are gonna be more empowered, their families, their
Yep.
communities, they're gonna get out there and do things in the world that they're currently just not doing. There's a great story about uh, a group of folks who they had this amazing Buddha, gold, solid gold Buddha, and they knew that an army was coming to steal everything in the village, and so they covered the Buddha with stuff that was unworthy,
Mm-hmm.
not really interesting. And so the folks who were coming through to steal didn't touch it. Generations later, somebody accidentally chips this thing that nobody knew was this
Mm-hmm.
incredibly valuable thing. And they finally realized that there was this ridiculously gorgeous and amazing spiritual foundation and literally 18 karat gold valuable, huge Buddha in their midst. And the story or the fable is that each of us as human beings have done that to ourselves.
Wow.
That in trying to protect ourselves, we hid what was the most beautiful and treasured and valuable in ourselves. And that the process of coaching is really just to uncover that, to take the plaster off and notice the golden Buddha inside. And I love that story so much because that's what we get to spend time doing, because even the person that I'm coaching might not understand, to your point, has forgotten how beautiful, how valuable, how talented, how smart, how intuitive they are. And the coaching process uncovers that for them.
Wow. That plaster, that varnish, I like rhymes, so I call it dust and rust, right? Those layers of dust and rust. And some of those are self-induced, some of them are societally induced, caused, whatever. The point is not to blame who caused what, but to say, okay, this is it, and what can we do from there? Now, this concept of the childlike sense of wonder, I'm thinking also, other people, your peers, other adults in the room at work, they might be acting like children, but in the negative sense. They might be throwing tantrums, they might be mean, they might be abusive, they might be needy, all of those things that the kind of the negative things that we associate with toddlerdom. And that's because they, in most cases, if not all cases, those adults have not done the work.
Yeah, and there are two ways of thinking of it. One of them is that they haven't done the work. The other way is thinking that compassion is necessary because they're clearly taken over by the plaster, the dust, and the rust. That they're completely activated on some level. Because the plaster, the dust, and the rust are created as ways to protect and survive.
Yeah.
And there's actually a good reason why, right? The army did not steal the beautiful, right? So it is helpful, but it's overused. So in that acting out that you might see in somebody, it serves a purpose. And so sometimes it's just calling out, hey, you're doing something that's going to break the boundaries and challenge people at a fundamental level. Cool, cool. Can we channel that energy instead of making it bad, right? Can we channel that energy in the brainstorming meeting where we need to come up with lots of ridiculous ideas that will drive innovation? And can we turn it down when it starts hurting people or disrupting a carefully organized collaborative effort that is in front of the client that might make us lose the account? So can we move the focus of that energy, which is good energy? Thank you for bringing that chaos-inducing thing. But can you bring that over here and channel it and focus it? And then can you use the innovation around pivoting if the slide didn't adjust so that now we're just going to speak? Can it be moved into a more productive place? And what is it that's triggering you that we can address so that you have more agency and self-regulation in those areas? Also, can we call out, right? Can we call out the impact? Because a lot of times people just don't realize. I always talk about intention and impact. So, hey, chaos making person, what was your intent in doing that? Ah, got it. The impact that it's having on everybody else around you is this. Do you see the delta? Because sometimes it's just information, it's data that the person doesn't have. They think, oh, I'm trying to make everything exciting and fun, trying to infuse energy and vitality into this meeting. It's like, I totally get that. What it's doing, though, is different than what you intend.
Or at what cost, right? At what cost sometimes. So let me just, because you're a poet with the words that you're spitting, it's just poetry. But I will challenge, because I'm a contrarian, so I'll challenge you. Well, what if, yes, there's a sense of protection and self-preservation, and I hear that, right? Like I've studied psychology for a quarter century at this point. But what if rather than like trying to preserve this statue and hiding it and preserving it and making it, and holding on to it, this sort of unhealthy attachment, what if the army did steal it and we realize, wow, we are not beholden, we are not sort of trying to worship this sort of false golden idol that really we don't need. We can be resilient and beautiful and have an awesome life, and we don't need this physical manifestation of that. And how liberating that might be if we allowed ourselves to just let go.
Oh, I think we totally could. I mean, holding on to anything causes suffering, right?
Mm. Speaking of that chair, right? Because I do, as spiritual as I am actually a very like, I like design. I do like high quality, like natural or sort of human made things. So when you were talking about the friend calling you something darker than the phrase you used, and you kind of did this
Yes.
like villain like cackle, I was my brain saw Morpheus in the Matrix,
Oh
Morpheus
my
with his
God, that's so
amazing
hilarious.
chair, helping his. So I'm thinking like, are you going to take the red pill or the blue pill? Is it going to be business as usual, or are you going to go deep? And so I think that's what we do with. I certainly do that with my clients. I wondered if you had any resonance there.
That's so funny. My executive coach told me to sit in this chair because I had sat in a couple different places with him, and he said, "No, that's the chair." And then
Hmm.
one session, I actually dressed up as Morpheus for the
Oh my
session.
goodness, that is. See, I'm picking it up. That's just too good. That's
But in
amazing.
terms of the red pill to blue pill, is it Andrew Huberman who just got called out for the manosphere? This lacquer about he's a neuroscientist
Oh
or
yeah, I know him. Yes, I
supposedly
know the scandal too. I
supposedly
know of him
was.
and yeah, the
So
veneer, the
there
lacquer.
is it's just being careful, and I have to make sure I check that, right? I think we all, especially if we carry the male gene
Mm,
or
mm,
identify as male, I suppose,
mm-hmm,
we have to be careful about the male energy
mm-hmm.
of A, seduction, and B, this force,
Yeah.
this pressure that we put on people to take binary
Mm-hmm.
paths. And I think
Yeah.
it's very important to embrace the feminine. I think it's very important to allow people to make choices and to evoke, to invite,
Mm,
as opposed to pressure and forced choices, especially singular ones. And so no, I think of the Matrix piece more as the way it resonates with me is this idea, and I love doing this in client work, is to have this I literally did this morning, pause the action. It's
mm,
more that, it's
mm-hmm,
more, let's pause the action because we're so accustomed to being human doings as opposed to human beings.
mm-hmm,
And for so many people, I find the coaching session is a moment to stop and literally look and go, what's happening here? What's going on? For the most
mm-hmm,
part, we're not doing a whole bunch. We're not
mm-hmm.
making a list and checking it twice and creating an executionable, all very male words, right? Action
Sure.
plan. That's a part of the session, an important part of the session. We do it at the end. We do
Mm-hmm,
it after truly exploring what's going on, truly identifying core values, North Star, purpose, and then towards the end, making a decision about usually one thing that we're going to
yeah,
do. That's going to be a delta from the way that we were doing it before we paused the action. So that's the way that I think of the magic,
yeah.
quote unquote, of a session.
I love that. And you're right. I mean, most of what I do with my clients is I talk, but mostly listen. And so they're not necessarily changing a behavior or an action. What they are doing is they are changing the frame through which, or the lens through which they're observing. Or so, for example, a lot of times I'm working with senior leaders on executive presidents or high stakes communication, whatever that means to them. And sometimes they're dealing with the ultra C suite, the C suite, and they're reframing it as, oh, wow, the CEO was yelling at me that I did something wrong. That's actually not my problem or my fault. It's actually the CEO's inability to rein in their own emotions and regulate their own selves. It's it's not about you, it's about them. And that takes a lot of pressure off of it. So they're not necessarily taking an action or moving differently through the world. They're just filtering it differently. And that is the delta. That's the red pill, blue pill, right? And I think that is beautiful that I think that the way I see it and the way you see it, there's a big overlap in that Venn diagram.
Yeah, I think there's a ton, and I mean ton as in the real word. There's a ton of reframing that happens in a session. And so using exactly the framework that you just talked about, I am presenting to CEO and C-suite stakeholders, especially if I'm a woman. And I've heard somebody say, I don't know. And then we reframe around that. And then they'll say, I don't have as much intelligence or experience. People say that a lot. And then it comes out, I have a ton of experience. I am real. My parenting of children gives me this piece and this piece. And all of a sudden, there's this gravitas, there's this weight that they're bringing into this room. There are gifts they're bringing into this room, insights, intelligence that nobody else in the room has. And equipped with that, they're presenting completely differently. They're just presenting from a completely different paradigm.
Wow. My work is very agnostic in terms of like industry. You know, I don't know anything about biotech or oil and gas or this, and I want to necessarily. I don't need to be an effective coach. But I'm wondering, do you tend to gravitate? Do other people from a certain industry tend to gravitate to you? Do you tend to sort of attract, like, like the Type A New York gal, or is it all over the map?
I do love design, tech, media, and education. And I think part of it is storytelling. My personal best experience was doing a one-man show to different colleges. I know, so many
Okay,
stories.
title. What was it? What's the title? At least what was it about?
Innocence Lost.
Wow. I'll have to look into that after.
It's kind of fun, but it was my life story. It was the biopic. And I remember when I did it at one university, and a white straight woman, came up to me afterwards and bared her soul. And it was my origin story as a
Wow.
coach. And I realized, to your point, it's more about telling powerful stories and evoking everybody else's ability to tell their own story in a very empowering way that opens up other people as well. And so education is nothing more than somebody standing in front of a classroom and telling students, right? It's mentor, the old word. Design is nothing more than visual for the most part. There's tons to design, a story there. And so I've been gravitating to, where do we tell the new cave drawing stories around the campfire that teach us how to live our lives? And that's just something that I've been passionate about, because growing up gay, growing up Black, growing up lower class, it's just all these things that you kind of have to figure out your way of articulating who you are in the world, who you be in the world. And I want other people to have all that wisdom unlocked for themselves as well. It's just something I personally and passionately care about.
Wow. Well, and where my brain went, just because I'm a very visual person, as you were talking about design, is I this woman who bared her soul. I'm thinking like she has those sort of thick white plaster, and under that, if you chisel that away, is that sort of inner being, that wisdom, who resonates with the experience of a Black, gay, lower class human. So this is why I am able to connect with. I mean, most of my clients do not look like me. Period. but I love that. I mean, I'm happy to work with anybody who's ready to work with me, but just I see that I'm more interested in the language of the heart, the language of the brain, the language of food, the language of did I say love? I mean, the language, not just like the business speak or the corporate speak, because that to me is not as interesting. Um, it's important for my clients, and so we go there, but we access it through other ways, and that's, I mean, it's a bit selfish. I like to have fun in my coaching sessions, so I don't like them to be very dry. But when we talk about food, when we talk about our origin stories, within again the first 90 seconds of meeting a new client, that's instant trust building. That's instant, like, oh, you have a story, I have a story, I want to hear more. We want to hear more about each other's stories. And we don't always have the time to go deep into the Genesis stories, but even if we just get a little bit of like an ember of that fire, of a flavor of that meal, it's enough to whet our appetites and want more of each other, and continue working with each other for, subsequent sessions. So that's how I see it anyway.
It's interesting because I think there are two ways that human beings communicate with each other. There is the data, and the going deep can be because of the language or the story, or talking about the depletion of the soul, or talking about not finding meaning in
Mm.
work, which you and I probably have a lot of conversations with
Yeah.
people about understanding deeply the dynamics with other human beings who are throwing tantrums, right?
Yeah.
That's all story and data. That's the one channel of communication. The other channel, and I think we pick up on that within 90 seconds or less. This is why sometimes in recruiting, and you and I both know this, an interviewer often makes up their mind
Mm.
within the first 60 to 90
Mm.
seconds.
Mm.
How a recruiter reads a resume in 30 seconds or less, I do not know, but
Yeah.
we do. We do. When
Yeah.
we're in
Yeah.
recruiting mode, we do read it that quickly, especially if we have a sense from the manager. This is an assumption.
Yeah.
Have a sense from the manager what they're looking for. We can quickly assess that. Some of that is data, but I think that's only 50%. The other 50%, emotional intelligence, EQ, the sixth sense.
Mm.
There is something that the AI doesn't quite get yet that
Yeah.
it's working on, because MIT is actually working on teaching
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
AI
Yeah.
empathy.
Yeah.
But there is something that we have as human beings deeply connected to life and death and survival that we immediately can sense or grok with another human being. And we call it vibe. We call it all these words that we sort of make up. But what we're saying is, I trust you. You're a trustworthy person. I feel relaxed. My shoulders are relaxing. I'm breathing around you.
Mm.
And that is something that I think is critical. And a coach, we call it coaching presence. A coach creates that space for another human being to really relax and not be under attack.
Yeah.
And psychological safety, those are all things that make space for human growth and development. Deep spiritual reflection, if you're spiritual, but reflection on something that goes beyond the rational. And I think we need that as human beings. And what I feel is we create less space for that. Even when we're feeling like we're relaxing on TikTok or relaxing on social media, we're depleting ourselves by not creating that half channel of our life. And I think coaching creates that space for us to tap
Wow.
into it.
Yeah. I mean, coaching for me, you talked about Huberman and the veneer and all that. When I'm at my best or my better self, the sessions are that much more effortless, and they're that much more successful in the eyes of the client, but also in my eyes, right? I'm a co-participant in it, a co-creator. So my sort of rather recent journey, although this is 39 plus years running, is I'm a sugar addict, and maybe better than being like a meth addict or something like that, but it still wreaked its havoc in my life. Um, just that, that white powdery substance that's in everything, available everywhere and socially encouraged, that is sucrose and sugar. So I gave up sugar for Lent. I'm not the world's best Catholic, I'll be the first to admit, but I gave it up for Lent. I had played with giving up in the past and with mixed success, but this is the first time that I gave up refined sugar. So I still eat, um, the fruits and all the veggies and all of that natural stuff. But I've really limited my refined sugar in these last couple of months, and I feel amazing. Everything else,
Yay.
yay! But I'm not sure I would have been there if I had stayed in HR and just been kind of like suboptimal, but really miserable in that line of work. I think coaching has allowed me to play and challenge myself, and so that I'm not a hypocrite, with my clients. Like they're working on their best selves, and here I am, like just stuffing myself with junk food and on TikTok all day. No, I don't have a TikTok. I do spend quite a bit of time on LinkedIn, but it's helpful for my business. I enjoy it. After a certain hour,
You have
I'm
healthy boundaries.
yeah, I have no, like, I'm a nerd when it comes to LinkedIn, but it's not an addiction in that sense. But sugar slash is slash was, and it's helped me. Like, just that one thing alone has helped me, like, improve everything about my life, including my skin, my mood, my energy when I'm running or swimming. I just think it's made me more present for my clients. So just that one little change, has changed everything for me. So anyway, but enough about me. You're the rock star of the show today. So I'm wondering, is there any aspect of your journey that you've been kind of working on, kind of looking at the person in the mirror, anything that you'd like to share?
Yes, you're touching on something that's critical, which is if I'm going to hold space for other people's growth and development, then this is my belief. I believe then I need to also be constantly working on my own growth and development. So, two parts to that. One, I have an inner controller. I don't think I've mentioned that before. He has a very dark laugh. And so there's a part of me that goes, oh, do you know the way to continue to grow and develop? You must grow and develop. And that person has gotten me a lot of goodies, tons of bennies, absolutely constant growth and development. And it's been so forced. It's very grind, hustle, pull yourself up by your bootstraps growth. And so what I've been learning over the last year especially is about an ease and flow of growth and development. As in, there's almost, I don't know why this is relevant, but I used to notice my dog would eat grass from time to time. And I would go, why is my dog eating grass? That makes, oh. And I don't know how a dog knows that. Again, that DNA thing, the way that we've survived, and this natural intelligence. And so what I've been paying attention to in terms of my own personal growth and develop is to really deeply, I'm big on meditation now, which I think is transformative, deeply understand what my body, my mind, all of it, what it needs, and to really ask it, what do you need? Yes, 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 I know you want that, but what do you need in order to continue to evolve? And to pay attention and to give it to myself within the boundaries of a sustainable long-term life. I have this vision of myself at 85, vibrant and healthy. And if that were to be true, and if I were to have the impact that I have in my mind around my vision for my impact on the world, my legacy, what is it that I'm doing today that takes me in that direction? And I've been really thoughtful lately about these are the hours I work. Summer Fridays forever. Weekends are for my weekends are for hubby and Marley the cat and my friends and my family. And by setting that up, it's almost as if there's a whole thing around ideal work week. But I literally did. I wrote down, this is what my ideal work week. And how did I get there? Because of how I felt on Friday, how I showed up for my family, And if I showed up for my family with 0 battery, I went, that was not a successful week.
Wow.
That was not a successful week.
Yeah.
If I show up with at least 50% and could get some sleep on Friday night and show up at 100% on Saturday morning for my family, that was a successful week. I'm not leaving everything on the field anymore.
Yeah.
That's garbage. Leaving everything on the field means there's nothing left.
Yes.
I'm not here
Yes.
anymore if I left everything on the field. So I need to keep a
Mm.
reserve for Karl and put the oxygen mask on my own face first. So that's
Wow.
new. That's a new behavior because I have a pleaser who will give everything away, believing that when I give it away, that's when I'll get. Again, I'm gone at the end of that transaction. And then the controller who believes that there's a fundamental right way to do things, and everyone, including me, must do it that way. And I have to constantly work on telling both of them to just chill out. It's great you have ideas about how things should go. It's great that you have deep empathy for people and want to be there for them. Please do that within moderation.
Yeah.
Channel your superpowers in the right way, in the most effective and helpful way. Can't help it. And, and leave some in reserve in the tank. Get 8 hours of sleep. Those are sleep, and sleep is my number one goal for 2024. I call it rest is sacred. That's my number one goal for 2024. And it's just countering decades of the hustle, decades of being first, decades of being right, decades of feeling that I was the only person, I was the only gay in the village. I was the only person holding up. I was a little Dutch boy. Like that was I joke about these things all the time, but they were very real in the way they ran my mind and my mindset. That as an HR person, I was the only person who cared about the other human beings and was attempting to have them have a positive. I was designing the employee experience. I mean, there's no wonder after COVID that 98% of HR leaders were burnt out. 98% according to the statistics.
Who are those 2%? I want to talk to them, right?
Who are those 2%? They have healthy boundaries. Yes. They turn down their pleaser and they let go their controller.
Well, you mentioned COVID. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, so that's why when I came out of the leading HR piece and moved into coaching, it's been a life teacher for me. Like I started my business officially in January of 2023. It changed my life because I learned that human beings actually have inner wisdom, and that my job was to evoke it, as opposed to my job was to make them do the thing.
So COVID was a great awakener for a lot of people, my clients, friends, myself included. Often I find that for my overachievers and my really successful clients and friends, it requires some sort of personal tragedy, whether it's physical, mental, social, something, some reckoning before they end up practicing all the things that we know about, which is the sleep and the health and all that. So I often feel, maybe there are exceptions, but for most humans, you need that slap in the face, that reality check of like, holy shucks, now I'm getting this diagnosis, or I'm dealing with, this ache or this mental pain, or this loss. I can't keep going, business as usual. It's, enough is enough. So it doesn't happen because you're okay or you're suboptimal and you're going to reach for the book. You're only going to reach for the book when you're already at the cusp of, or you've been burnt out for too darn long. So, yes, we can learn from other people, absolutely. But I think in order to start the process of learning and unlearning, usually there's some sort of crisis that spurs that. That's been my experience. Agree or disagree?
They say, I don't know who this magical they is, they say pain is the touchstone of all spiritual progress. And from that saying, I know, from that saying, though, I extrapolate exactly what you just said, which is you have to be in pain to do something different, or something called homeostasis. I don't know. Homeostasis is this idea that we're going to keep things going. You know, a moving rock keeps moving. It's momentum.
Yeah.
And unless there was something fundamentally jarring in the experience, there's no motivation to do something radically different. Example, transform. You have the caterpillar butterfly thing in one of your posts, and I have been jamming on that now for about 18 months. This whole idea and this coaching journey has been a transformation for me personally. But there are these moments in your life, right, when you wrap yourself in a chrysalis, and then I didn't know this, you probably know this, which is when the butterfly situation happens, which is the same DNA, the same cells, it's literally the same thing. The caterpillar literally turns into goop, crying.
Wow.
And then the same goop turns into this butterfly with bones and wings and all the stuff. And it's in this chrysalis. Apparently, if you ever saw a chrysalis wiggling and trying to come out of this casing, you might be tempted, as coaches are sometimes, to cut this thing open and set it free. It is the worst thing you could do because it is the pain and the struggle of the butterfly coming out of the encasing that builds the musculature and releases the chemicals that allows the wings to fully open and then for the butterfly to fly. And so in coaching sessions, sometimes I am tempted when my controller comes out to cut this thing open and go, here, come on out. What that means is that it will be completely paralyzed and it will struggle on the ground and die.
Wow. Wow.
And so, yes, I do believe
nothing to add or subtract to that.
I don't think we can add to nature. I think nature, DNA, evolution has created some of the most amazing and powerful things. And in coaching, you get to watch, encourage, evoke, and be surprised. This has been ongoing surprise for me, is to watch with delight and childlike awe as people transform in front of me. And it's just that I'm holding a safe space for them to do that amazing, mind-boggling work. And of course, I get so much out of it. So much battery and energy is given back to me in coaching sessions by coachees because I see them bravely do what would be terrifying outside of being inside, right? It's like, whoa, that's so cool that you're doing that. Yay, you. And it's literally a cheerleader going, yay, you, but not going in and cutting and opening because human beings are very tender and we have to be very gentle in the process. I'm learning to do that for myself to really give myself that self-compassion, which apparently is the hardest thing for us as human beings to do because we've been motivated and survived by being really hard on ourselves. And when we can apply some self-empathy and compassion where it's appropriate, it's really amazing what happens out of that process.
Wow. I have very little, I have compassion and empathy, but also less tolerance for BS. So in other words, if someone's coming to me and they're telling me about this, that, and the other, and this is what they can't do, or this is the negative self-talk, and they're like, well, I ask, where would you want to go? And then the follow-up question is, what's standing in the way? And not 99, but 100% of the time, it's nothing. Me. Right?
It's all the stuff in between here.
But to get to that point, though, that doesn't require a 6-month training program or coaching program. It can happen in it can happen in minutes, it can happen in weeks, but like it doesn't have to be. Again, the people have done the work privately, alone, through their own reading or their own observations. By the time they come to my proverbial door or Zoom call or in person, they've done a lot of the work already. So it does make my job easier.
Yeah, and you hearken to something really important, which is all the work doesn't happen in session. The work happens outside. And I think a lot of the work that I do is to try and empower people to do that work and hold them accountable. But it's really the inspiration, it's really lighting the flame, and then they're responsible for keeping that flame going outside of session. and then coming back for a little refuel to go back out. And a lot of that refuel is happening internal, and I'm providing some shade
Yeah.
protection, some lamp action around the
Lamp
flame.
action. Well, hopefully that lamp, that light, that fire doesn't kill the moth, but if it does, it's out of our hands.
You're so mean, Dawid.
I'm just saying the
Yeah,
reality
but
is
you have a little dark side to you
who
too.
doesn't? Who doesn't? I'm very today the word was funkalicious, but sometimes the word is,
A little
all dark.
kombucha. It's a
Yeah,
little kombucha.
sure. I'm a little bit, yeah, there's a little bit of that sort of carbonation there. But honestly, people find it refreshing, and so it is a little bit like it's self not so it's what's the word I'm looking for? Uh it's reinforced by clients, right? Like it's not just like everything is rose colored, because a lot of times they're coming to me from a very toxic environment, either internally, usually both internally and externally. So they actually don't resonate well with someone who's just like it's all perfect and rose colored glasses. They actually don't want that, and they're very clear about that.
No toxic positivity.
Yeah. But again, just how you can be confident about what you know and confident about what you don't know, and that's okay too. You could be happy and sad at the same time. You could be be liberated and enchained in other aspects. Like all those things can happen concurrently. They don't cancel each other out.
Yeah,
So
that was a mind-blowing. The diversity thing was mind-blowing for me. And I guess everybody else knew about it, but I found out about it late. Is this diversity matrix?
mm,
So you can be privileged and unloved in
mm,
so many different
mm, mm,
aspects.
mm,
You're favored because you're tall,
yeah,
you're disfavored because you're black. It can
yeah,
all exist in one human being,
mm,
and more important, in their own internal experience, like the introjected racist, for example, and can also then be reflected outside. One of my most magical sessions was with a woman who said, I feel constrained, like there's a corset around me, stopping me from being my best self. And I
wow,
asked more questions. And it turns out the corseting has two layers. It has an outside layer that presses in, and it has an internal layer. And for
mm,
her, this visual became the rubric for the coaching. And it was figuring out how to unthread the internal and address the external, which you didn't have agency and control over, but at least starting to see the weaving, back to the matrix, to
yeah,
see the
wow,
weaving of it, and then identify how she could communicate to the external, how to unlock some of that. But she also had to do the internal, because the internal was actually underneath the external, and it was just as tight. And
mm,
so it was mind-boggling that she had that metaphor, and that it was exactly the metaphor that she needed to figure out sleep, nutrition, her own schedule, the responsibilities she was putting on herself, not related to the
mm,
external,
mm,
connected but separate. And then to talk to her boss, the conversation she wanted to have with her boss, with the organization, about her role, her title. It was just amazing watching her do the unweave and reweave, and now to be able to breathe so much easier
mhm,
and connect with the others in her family and her workplace. I also love this idea of work-life balance when it's the same human being who's showing up in both locations, and then it's really one story. And so and I think COVID did that too, right? It forced you to go, oh, there's your little dog, and there's your child, and oh, that's your home, and oh, you really live far away, right? When you
mhm,
type in, where are you in the
yeah,
world?
yeah,
It's so important that that happened, even though it was a horrible
yes.
situation, because it really brought out so much data and information that had been suppressed, or let's pretend that's not happening. There was no choice but to reveal
Yeah.
that during that time.
I find that my clients have, once they get started on this path, right? Once they don't necessarily have to like dedicate 100% of their energy to this,
And they
new
won't.
version of themselves, but
They won't.
But they are high achievers. They are focused. They have a lot of energy. That energy is often wasted on TikTok or Netflix or whatever. I mean, it's important to have creative outlets and to have sort of, some of that sort
Or
of,
soothing.
or soothing, absolutely. But if all you're doing is literally coming home and all you're doing, for 5 days a week or 7 days a week is watching, Pablum and just sort of TV, that is your life. That most people that I hang around with anyway, or I work with, want more than just that, but they're not allowing themselves to access that. So once they start on this project of self-discovery, self-improvement, they start realizing, oh, they have resources, they have the wherewithal, they have the energy, they have the creative ideas, they have other people in their networks that can support them, and it all starts to sort of go into confluence, and all starts to conspire towards their benefit, and
I
that is a
agree
beautiful
with
thing.
that. Somebody shared with me, have it catch fire for them. And when I say catch fire, it's like a
Mm.
forest fire, that they get so excited about this other version of themselves that they are intrinsically motivated to
Mm.
make the changes. And then you're hearkening to that homeostasis word again, which is the wife or the husband, the boss, the
Mm.
community, the sugar in everything, right?
Mm.
Is asking this person after they leave this enlightened moment or this pause where they looked at everything, as soon as they step out of session, the homeostasis is going to call them very powerfully. It's like a neural superhighway.
Mm. Yeah.
And we opened and evoked this dirt road that you don't even know because you haven't been
Mm.
down that road
Right.
before. And they get out in the world and they go, superhighway, little dirt road that goes into a dark corner. Which one do I pick? Right. And so
Uh-huh.
it really needs to be so
Red pill, blue
exciting.
pill. Hello.
It needs to be so exciting and to allow grace for, stepping back and going back onto the highway and just asking more interesting questions, right? So that it becomes something that they're passionately excited about. And here's what I love when my coach said it is enroll the people in your lives, enroll them. Like a Harvey Milk
Mm.
situation. I will
Mm.
enroll you, is to
Mm.
really invite the other people and to have them do it, right? To go and enroll their boss, enroll their husband and wife and children, enroll their community and
Mm.
supporting them in this new version, realizing it's going to have so much value for the other people in their lives as well. So I really think
Okay.
about it less as just changing the person or inviting the person, but inviting their entire ecosystem to change.
I only have like 17 follow-up questions to that, but I
But
have
we're
to
at
be mindful
time.
of your time and mine. So, sort of the final question, and I got to come up with a better question, but I do want people to be able to find you, and I'll include the links and all that. But how can people find you and get in touch with you, or where do you want them to learn more about you?
I am big on the LinkedIn situation, and I also have a workwellgroups.com website
Mm-hmm.
if people want to stay in touch for a monthly newsletter.
Awesome.
And I'll drop some wisdom there as well. But workwellgroups.com is a great place to learn more. And if you're on the socials, LinkedIn is a great place to find me because I love to drop some thoughts there on the daily, Monday through Friday as well.
I can attest to that. Even just today, the one I read this morning was awesome. So thank you, Karl, for being awesome. I might reconnect with you. I mean, I'll definitely reconnect with you offline, but I might have to do a part two because again, I have all of those questions. So,
I have some
um,
questions.
yeah,
I have
I have some questions.
sir, I have a question. I have a
Yeah,
question.
I so appreciate you. This has been a joy, and years ago, this would have just been I would have been a ball of anxious, nervous wax, and today I'm not that, and certainly you made that even easier and even more fun. So I thank you for all you are and do. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dawid. I really appreciate you inviting me into this generous space. This was fun.
Awesome. Enjoy, enjoy. Stay empowered and have a wonderful day.
You
Take care.
too. All right,
Bye.
bye-bye.
All right.